everyone, David McLeod here, your Life Mastery Coach. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. This is episode 168, Making Each Moment Count. Now, when we're going through the process of significant life transformation, we generally find ourselves dealing with a lot of stress. And I'll bet you've noticed there's been a lot of stress in the last year for sure. So as a result of that, we may not be able to recognize or appreciate the true gifts, blessings, and moments of serendipity that exist all around us until we're on the other side of that major stressor. So the world seems to have turned upside down as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic. And it's, in some people, consider this to be a great reboot. And there's both positive and negative perspectives on that concept of the great reboot. And but what I've noticed is the pandemic has changed life as we know it. And the last year has been characterized by a lot of uncertainty and chaos and pain and lots of other things. And so although we have managed to make it through this challenging year, for many of us, uncertainty and confusion continues. And so the question is, what can we do about it? Well, to help shed some light on this issue, I have invited a nurse practitioner, medical intuitive, and international speaker to join me on this show. My guest earned a Doctor of Nursing Practice degree in 2008 from Case Western Reserve University and is currently President of Spiritual Wellness for Life and President of Recovering Healthcare. She has developed innovative programs to support patients and their loved ones before, during, and after surgery. So please welcome my friend and my colleague, the delightful Dr. Dolores Fazzino, to join us on this show. Welcome, Dolores. It's so great to have you on again. I think it's been about a year now since you were on this show before. Is that right?
Oh, surely, David, and thank you for inviting me. Man, has this been a year, huh?
We could call it a year, or we could call it some other things, as you and I were talking about before we started. There's been a lot of crazy stuff going on, that's for sure. And it's really having a huge impact on us everywhere.
You know, I totally agree. And, you know, for the longest time, I think this was actually coming. You know what I'm saying? It's like for the longest time, you know, we've been in such motion of doing and being robotic and automatic and reactive that, you know, this has been a grand reset to allow people to maybe become more reacquainted with themselves. For the longest,
great perspective, yeah.
Yeah, for the longest time, I think we've been doing mobiles. You know, it's like go to work. We need to produce. It's about doing. You know, it's an external thing. How we could, you know, keep up with everything else that everybody else has, you know, trying to make something happen. I call it the proverbial pushing a boulder up a hill. I mean, just the thought of that just makes me want to cringe. And it's so exhausting that, you know, it's no surprise that, you know, people are stressed out and they've created a lot of stress related health problems for themselves because of that. But, you know, up until this last year, people were starting to realize that they needed to stop that merry-go-round of life, but they just didn't know how to do it.
Right.
So
first of all, I want to say I love your term, a doing mobile. That's awesome. Did you just come up with that, or is
that just came right out? It's a doing mobile.
I love it. The creativity, a doing mobile. Man, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, because
I'm going to have to steal that from you, and you're going to have to use it as well, because it's a good term. And
it's a doing mobile. It's like, here we go.
And I think it's a very descriptive term too, because, you know, I should say, obviously it's descriptive, but it's accurate. I think it does reflect the nature of human behavior that had over the last 100 years. It's just getting more and more. How much more can we do? And we, as you say, we've kind of forgotten to stay connected to the truth of who we are. And maybe this pandemic, whatever you want to call it, is a call for all of us to remember the truth of who we are.
Oh, without a doubt, David. And, I think it's been an interesting observation. I've been in healthcare for well over 40 years, and I, do some clinical stuff as an assistant surgeon, and I assist in all different types of surgeries. And just to witness what's happening right now from the healthcare perspective with this whole pandemic, yes, folks, it's very real. You hear people saying that this is a hoax or whatever. I say no. I'm on the front lines. This is very real, folks. When you have refrigerated cartons or containers in the parking lot for the bodies, it's very real. So please, I'm just going to do a little side thing here. Please follow protocol. Wear a mask when you're out in public. I even recommend not even wearing a cloth mask. Wear like a hospital grade 3-ply, paper mask. I knew that early on a year ago, and I've been doing that. I've never gotten a cloth mask. I won't wear one. But you need to have multiple layers. That's going to help. Secondly, is that please social distance, especially our young people. They think that they're invincible, and them going out to, a party with their friends has no consequences. But yes, it does. They come home to their families. They might have elderly people living in the house. And guess what? You might be asymptomatic, meaning you have no symptoms, but you have it and you are spreading it to people. So the thing is that, just because you don't have it, have the symptoms doesn't mean that you're not a carrier. I kind of give the analogy of like what tuberculosis is. Some people have it and are a carrier and been exposed to it. But, a lot of times you may be asymptomatic. So that doesn't mean that you're, exempt from this. It's like you are part of it, but a smaller version of it.
Right. Well, as we were talking about before we went live here, I think, and I think you and I both agree on this, that whatever COVID is, it's something more than just a virus. It's a more complex, construction of energy and matter and everything else coming into play, and it's having a huge impact on people. And, you're right. People are getting sick. People are dying. People are going through some terrible ordeals as a result of whatever this thing is. I think virus, though, is just a tiny part of the equation. There's a lot more to it than that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to, go into too much detail. But I think enough for us to just be careful, take care of each other, take care of ourselves. That's really the big message here that I want to convey.
I agree, David. And it's almost like this whole COVID, the whole lockdown that happened in March, it was multifaceted. It was like actually a reboot for people getting off the doing mobile or the merry-go-round, okay, to reset themselves.
Right.
Finally the ride stopped and we had to get off and just allow ourselves just to be where we're at in the present moment.
Sorry, would you mind turning off your camera? Okay, I'm not sure what happened there, but.
Well, that's okay. So what happens is we are actually given an opportunity to spend some time with ourselves, okay? Because in lockdown, you can't really do anything. The whole rug of doing has been pulled out from underneath us. Right. Yet some of us freak out at the fact that we have to spend time by ourselves. OMG. Well, right. Guess what, folks?
Right.
The longest relationship you're ever going to have in your life is the one you have with yourself.
Right.
Just think about that for a second.
Right. It's true. It's true.
So the thing is, how are you being with yourself? How are you treating yourself? Are you loving yourself, or do your self-talk just totally sabotage who you are? Those hidden things that nobody else hears, but you hear in your mind, that you're beating yourself up for things, and you're not being so kind to yourself.
Right.
And sometimes we use the external to distract ourselves from going there.
Right.
So, I looked at everything that's happened, and mostly what happened last spring is a massive reset for people to, stop, get off the ride, make each moment count, and what's really important.
Yeah. And well, at the same time, though, part of what happened over the last year is people were put in situations where they weren't allowed to connect with loved ones, particularly loved ones who were sick or who were in hospital and who maybe even died. And that may have been extremely painful for them. It's difficult to get in a mindset of making each moment count when you've had to deal with that kind of scenario that may not have been necessary. It may not have been necessary. It may have been necessary, but it may not have been. And the thing is, we just don't know enough about this to be sure that we're doing things in a scientific way. So I'm not trying to propose one choice or another, but we all have to deal with the truth of our own pain, our own fear, our own anxiety, our own whatever is going on. And if you happen to be someone who's living with another person or with kids or whatever, then you have that additional stress of trying to work out how to go to work, how to go to school, or if there's going to be school. I mean, all of these things are putting huge amounts of stress and pressure on people.
You couldn't have said it better, David. It's true. It is open like Pandora's box of the unknown. There's probably more uncertainty now than ever. Okay. So we can agree that the only thing that is certain right now is uncertainty.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's just like, okay, so for those of us who like to be in control, and
raise your hand.
Yeah. Hey. Or are perfectionists that things have to look a certain way, you might as well just throw that out, because there's nothing is certain anymore. So the only thing that I know for myself that's certain is that inner wisdom that comes within me.
Right.
Okay? So for me, I feel, I've been practicing this way of life for a very, very long time, predating COVID. In fact, I was teaching this modality in my practice for a very long time before it became a real thing, where each of us needs to develop a relationship with ourselves and spend time with ourselves, get to know ourselves, so you know yourself so well that anything that's on the external that the masses are following, and you know yourself so well, and you're getting that voice, don't do it, you listen to it.
Right.
And this is, I believe, what part of the reset is. And yes, there's other stresses, people who have a lot of responsibilities for children and family members. I mean, I can't even imagine what that's like, having to homeschool kids. Right. When, pretty not homeschool, but, have a whole different modality and platform of learning. Right.
I just like to invite the folks who are watching this live show, feel free to put comments or questions into the chat area there on the lower, well, on my screen, it's on the lower left. It probably is on the left for you as well. I'm curious to know if you who are watching this have had some of these experiences yourself, or maybe we're missing something about the whole COVID experience, and we'd love to hear you share. So please feel free to put your experiences into the chat, and we will get to them as soon as we can. So Dolores, now you got into the whole healthcare business quite a few years ago. I mean, you've been involved as a nurse for a long time, and then you went and became a nurse, a doctor of nursing practice. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition? How did that happen? What brought you into that whole world of healthcare in the first place?
Well, it's an interesting story, David. Believe it or not, I was on the pathway to become a concert clarinetist when I was a teenager. Oh yeah, not a lot of people know this story.
But you even told me that before.
Yeah, so I mean, I was getting ready to apply for music colleges and stuff like that, and my dad during my childhood, he for about 10 years of my, young childhood, he was sick.
Oh, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
He had developed a hospital-acquired infection back in the 1960s after having back surgery, and he almost died then. And then every 4 years passed, he was fine, and then he developed abscesses in his abdominal cavity and would be sicker than a dog. And this was coinciding with when his immune system got compromised. So from 1970 to 1975, 76, he had 4 separate episodes of that, and my mom, had just had enough of that because Western medicine was not helping at all. So he ended up having a CAT scanner done in 1975, 76, and it determined that where the infection was coming from was where his previous surgery was back in 1966. So the solution at the time was he was going to have a spinal fusion, but in the 1970s, it was still in its neophyte phases of development, that type of surgery. So it came with a high risk of either being paralyzed, being dead, or, maybe you survived. So my mom didn't want to have anything to do with that. So, of course, back then, the National Enquirer is very equivalent to what Facebook is today. That's where you got all your news, So my mom read about this healer that was from Carroll, Michigan. He was I believe he was a Presbyterian minister that had the gift of laying on of hands. And back in the 70s, he had been doing that successfully for well over 20 years. So he started in the 50s. He had been very assistive in helping his brother heal from leukemia. So my mom said, I'm really interested in this, and, let it be. So the most interesting part of this story is that my dad was at the hospital at the time when my mom was doing her research. My mom approached my father. My father is the biggest skeptical ever. He's like the show me guy. He should have been from Iowa, or you know what I'm saying? the show me state, Missouri. It's Missouri, right?
I can't remember.
But anyway, he was the biggest skeptic. So he said to my mom, he said, you know what? If the doctor agrees to this, I'll do that. So my mom marched down to the nurse's station. I kid you not. The surgeon's sitting there, and she says, Doctor, I'm thinking about having a spiritual healer come in to assist my husband. Would that be okay? Doctor's writing, looks up there and says, sure, that's fine. Goes back to writing. My mom goes back into the room, makes the announcement to my dad. My dad agreed. So my mom walked back out to the nurse's station. Not 10 minutes passed. The same surgeon's sitting there. He's writing. And my mom said to the surgeon, my husband agreed to have the spiritual healer come in. And he looked up and he said, what are you talking about? I never agreed to that.
Yeah, right.
So it gets even better than that. That was the doorway of the beginnings of this miracle. And to talk about something else stepping in to assist.
Right.
So a month later, Reverend Holmes came from Carroll, Michigan to our humble home in Connecticut. My 2 grandmothers were there, myself and my siblings. I'm one of 4. And we were sitting around the kitchen table, and my dad was there with the minister. And Dad was sitting off by the side, with the minister. And the minister knew that somehow my dad had one leg shorter than the other. I don't know how he knew this. My dad was barefoot, didn't have, his shoes with a lift in anywhere in sight, no slippers or anything. And he said, okay, to my father, says, Joe, put both your feet up. And sure enough, there was like a 1-inch gap. I can't even, with the book here, you could see it. And he put his feet, he said, put your feet down. And he started praying over my father, touched his solar plexus and his crown chakra. And not even 3 minutes went by, and he said, okay, put both your feet up. They were both the same length.
Oh, interesting.
In that moment, my life changed forever. I knew that there was more to healthcare and health and wellness than what we were being fed,
right,
in our medical world at the time. And it was my job to take that knowledge and be the bridge. And so that's where my career has led to. Now let's go back to my father. My father, who was a skeptic, who needed to have this as a demonstration, started bawling like a baby, like I've never seen him before.
Oh, wow.
And he, so the Reverend continued to work on him for about another half hour. He was instructed to go to bed and rest because, as we know, when you work on your energy field, it's open. He slept for over 24 hours. A month later, he went back to get a repeat CAT scan. Whatever was there before was gone.
Amazing.
He never had to have the surgery. In fact, he never had to revisit that particular problem in his lifetime. And that was in 1975. He passed away about 9 years ago at the age of 80.
Wow, what a beautiful story. And I do remember you have shared this story before, but I didn't know about the clarinetist part.
Oh, God, yeah. That was the only way I could express my emotions, because in our household, we weren't allowed to feel.
Right. I'll bet that came after your father had his experience, huh?
Oh, my God. It was just like, yeah. So it's been an interesting journey. So I play on the fringes of woo-woo in the Western medicine, and I'm very comfortable with that. It's my colleagues who are not.
Yeah. So I'd just like to acknowledge Donna for her comment. She said, "We have not seen my dad in person since March 2020. That's almost a year." That's
Donna,
awful.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, only visiting through his bedroom window. It's been a struggle, but something good to come out of it. Well, I certainly hope something good comes out of it. That's for sure. But that's got to be very, very painful to be, separated by a window. You're not even allowed to go in and give him a hug or anything like that. That's just awful. Humans are meant to touch, and to connect and to, to share their energy with each other. This kind of isolation is not good for anybody. I'm so sorry, Donna. I'm going to send out my own loving prayers for your father, and I hope that helps him in some way to heal. And I know, Dolores will do the same.
Donna, I just want to say one thing. I'm sending you so much love from my heart right now, and I invite you to send that to your father as well. Sometimes, seeing and touching, when you can't do that, when you send it energetically, they're still feeling it. So I want to remind you of that as well. Okay.
Yeah. And I find it interesting that Sarah also commented. She says, "I totally get that this has been a real struggle for many people, but what so many are realizing from this is what is really important, and it is not things, but people, family, and friends." Absolutely right, Sarah.
Well said, Sarah. This is what is part of making every moment count. When, and even, we're blessed to be in a time, believe it or not, where we have electronic technology where you could FaceTime people, even though you can't be there physically present. It's still an opportunity. When we flash back 100 years ago, when the Spanish flu came, oh my God, that was a whole different time and place and a whole different pandemic. But when you look at where we are now, and I'm not trying to downplay any of this, okay? But, if we look at how everything is panned out in healthcare, we were set up for telemedicine about 10 years ago. Did it never come into play? It was just on the fringes of being introduced with the pandemic. It is now accessible, and it will continue to be accessible after this blows over or whenever it's going to do that. Right. So we've had the infrastructure for a lot of things right now that had never been allowed to blossom into the full capability of what they can be. And we're seeing that. I know for some people who are at home with their kids teaching virtual classrooms, yes, that's actually been in play for about 10 years, but it was never utilized to the capacity that it is now. So we are set up better to deal with things than we had been maybe 20 years ago if this happened. Okay, number one. Number two, I know it's not the optimal thing, but it's one thing that we could focus on and make the most of that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So Donna, I want to thank you again for sharing your truth. I'm afraid we can't bring you on actually to speak at this point. We just don't have the time available. But if you want to share more in the chat, we might be able to try and fit that in. Yeah. This idea that we should be doing more stuff is is not necessarily the way to go. And, Dolores, as you were talking, you just, you talked a lot about how we've looked so much to science. We've turned science into our new religion, to the point where we don't even think about energetic stuff anymore. Science doesn't know how to study consciousness. Science doesn't really know how to study the power of love, the power of prayer, the power of all those things that maybe aren't tangible. Science hasn't figured out ways to do that yet. So therefore, a lot of it gets dismissed under the rubric of science with a TM, trademark beside it, because there's no money to be made in that. And yet, as you pointed out, energy is, anybody can manipulate energy. We all do it all the time. It's just how we have to learn how to do it in a way that is of benefit to other people.
Well, I just love the story too. When we talk about distant healing, it's like I've always been fascinated with the fact that the further away the person is, they actually feel it more intensely. Right. Which is really crazy. I spent a lot of time down in Brazil doing some studying with, some different healers and stuff like that. And we would do, we did a session with my father when he was still alive, just to see how things were going. My father was more than 6,000 miles away. And, we had him lie down and we were working with him energetically, and he felt everything. Which is interesting, because if you wonder, how can that be? But right. You know what? It's just like radio waves. Radio waves are invisible, but they're there, and they right. carry like the sound and everything. So energetically, we're energetic. Everything is energy. We're energetic beings. This cup of coffee is an energetic thing, even though it's inanimate. But is it really?
Oh, exactly. And I'm glad you brought this up. Sorry, I got this plant sticking in my arm here. I'm glad you brought this up, because what you described, this action, healing at a distance, is something that Einstein was perplexed about. Because in the world of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, they have this thing called what he called spooky action at a distance. That's what his terminology for it. But science today calls it quantum entanglement. It just means that you have a particle here at some point in space, and in some distance, it could be infinitely distant away, there's another particle that corresponds to that first particle, and they interact exactly. And so this notion of healing at a distance or action at a distance really isn't all that woo-woo. It's scientifically verifiable, although we haven't been able to verify it on the macro level. We've only been able to verify it on the quantum level. So, but we know it's there, and we know it's a very real effect. So,
well, I want to segue and add to what you're talking about, is that, when you look back in history, a lot of theories which we knew were true could never be researched and studied in the scientific matter, because they didn't have the technology or the capability to do that at the time. But as time progressed, those things were proven true. So right. What we're dealing with now is a lot of things that are in the same boat as previous things. We know that this is true. We know energetically, we know intuitively this is true, yet science quote doesn't back it. So it's like in the concrete world, it doesn't really exist. And, I could call BS on that. But the thing is like, we don't have the technology or whatever we need to prove that true.
Right. But on top of that, there's also a lot of corruption in science.
Absolutely.
As well as everywhere else in the world. But, think about this for a minute. How much research, I put quotes around that, air quotes around research. How much research is done in order to support a pre-existing belief that it exists only because it makes lots of money?
Oh, don't even get me started with that. I mean, I have this argument with my colleagues as well. David, I'll never forget this. One anesthesiologist came up to me and says, Dolores, the stuff that you practice it's not evidence-based. And I don't know where that voice came from, but I got this download and I just let him have it. And this is what I said, evidence-based. Well, let's talk about your evidence-based medicine. I said, big pharma, the ones that get this new latest and greatest, drug for treating something that's supposed to be wonderful, and it's on the market for 2 years, and then it's taken off in a class action lawsuit with all these side effects. I said, is this the evidence-based medicine you're practicing? I said to him, I have a doctorate. I did clinical research. I said, I know about statistics. They're always manipulated. And I said, if one person has a positive result from what I do, I said, that's enough evidence-based for me, period. He sat there and his mouth was to the floor.
Yeah.
I walked away.
Exactly. Well, and you mentioned statistics. Well, wasn't it Mark Twain who said there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics? That's right. Yeah. But it's true. You have data, right? You have data. Statistics is the process of analyzing that data and trying to come up with some understanding of what the data is. Statistics is the process of saying the average of this data is such and such, the standard deviation of this data is such and such, and on and on and on. And what happens is statistics has now been turned into a yardstick. Do you remember going into school? And I remember when I was a kid and going to school, you had to fit into the curve, because if they gave everybody an A+, which maybe they deserve because they did great work, well, that didn't follow the bell curve. So some people had to be A+, and some of those A+ had to turn into E's or F's.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. So they were using statistics as a way of forcing people into a particular way of thinking and modeling, and that's just completely wrong.
Well, and I want to add something else to this conversation. In research, they're always trying to, I look at humans as a big bowl of fruit, all different types of fruits, and
Are you calling me a fruit?
No. Well, what I'm saying, the beauty of humans and their individual and their uniqueness. Okay, this beautiful fruit salad, and they want to change this whole fruit salad into an orange.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So the thing is, I feel that they miss the point, that they don't take into consideration that everybody's individual story. And I'm going to just elaborate a little bit. Yes, we're physical. That's only 25% of the pie. There's the emotional, mental, and spiritual, components that science doesn't even take into consideration. We know now that everything that happens to us with our beliefs, whether we express our emotions or not, our connectedness with our inner knowingness, is the foundational piece that creates ill health and unwellness.
Right.
And so they're looking at just the physical stuff to think that they could fix everything and give somebody a pill for it. They don't realize that those underlying components are creating something that's going to be uniquely different for each individual as how they got there. Okay.
Exactly.
So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's so much of the psychic that we don't even consider when we talk about medicine. We don't even think about, how are you thinking? I mean, how many doctors even ask you, what are you thinking? How are you thinking? What kinds of thoughts have you got? They'll say, oh, you've got a sore thumb here. Let me give you a Band-Aid. Oh, you've got, pain in your thing. Oh, let's cut it open and find out what the problem is. Oh, you've got a headache. Well, here, take these aspirin. It's all symptom based. Yeah. There's really very little. There are very few doctors that I have found who actually do the root analysis. They say, I wonder what's causing those symptoms. Most of them, you've got this symptom. Here's this drug. Go away. Leave me alone. Well,
yes, that's the medical model. In the center of the pie hole is drugs, procedures, and, surgery and stuff like that.
Right.
Rarely do you find the complementary and alternative stuff. It's on the fringes of that pie. But, the focus and the shift I'm hoping we're seeing in the future is that if you vision a pie in the middle is health and wellness, and just visualize that pie being divided into equal slices, which every slice has, inclusive of Western medicine, every complementary and alternative possibility. And so, David, maybe for you, you may need a little bit of acupuncture, a little yoga, maybe a little bit of Western medicine. For Dolores, maybe I need to do, Chinese medicine, a little Ayurvedic there, maybe more motion therapy. What I'm saying here is that each slice of the pie is equal, no matter what it is. And it's like when you combine those slices together, they become more synergistic and they're better than what they were by themselves. Right. And this is going to be uniquely different for each person based on who they are. Each person who is here on earth has had different life experiences, how they reacted to it, what kind of blocks they had. That's what makes us human and so unique, but you cannot classify that in research.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. You just described something that I think is very, very important. You and I could show up to the same doctor with exactly the same apparent symptoms and issues. And it could be that we need two extremely different treatments. Because, if you just look at the superficial, then we may say, oh, that treatment is this. That's it. That's all there is to it. But if we start looking deeper and deeper, start looking at the emotional, start looking at the psychic, start looking at the way we're thinking and all that other stuff, now we might say, she's had this problem with her father going through this thing, and he had this problem with his mother doing something else. Mm-hmm. So maybe we need to come up with a couple of different strategies. And that's exactly right. And so, I do my work with people as a coach, and I see people all the time who show up with all kinds of similar complaints, similar kinds of issues, similar kinds of problems that they want to solve. But ultimately, their solution is unique. Each person has a unique solution.
Absolutely. And, like myself, the work that I do with clients too is like they call me the energy whisperer because it's just like my gift is that they start talking and I just see the whole thing unraveling, like right. Where the issues are and what can be shifted and changed. A lot of times we are unaware of what things are until you start talking about it, and then you could kind of see, okay, I could see how this thing is, and what are your thoughts about this, that, and the other? And so, yes, because once you start working with the issues that have created the disease or the unwellness, it's surprising how quickly things shift. Our bodies are remarkable, and we have been disconnected from them for so long that it's really a time to, come into realignment with our bodies, be in your physical body, and allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. Because for the longest time, we were told that feelings are not good and, just stuff your emotions, ignore them, pretend, they're going to go away someplace. Well, just remember, we talked about everything's energy. Your emotions are energy as well. Exactly. Yeah. So the thing is, it's like when you start experiencing them and then all of a sudden you stop them, that's a trapped emotion. Exactly. That's someplace, that energy's got to go someplace. And eventually, if it's not dealt with, it travels into your physical body. Right.
By the way, I'm curious, have you ever read any of the work by Dr. David Hawkins?
No, I have not. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I have.
Yeah, he's the consciousness guy.
Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting. He's had his own very, very interesting experiences. And he talks about how when he was going through what can only be described as a powerful enlightenment kind of process, he found that his body was just kind of doing things on its own. It didn't really need him around.
Right.
Although, if he wasn't there consciously to support it, then the body might do stupid things. but it still will take care of itself. It will heal itself. It will do everything that needs to be done, provided the rest of the consciousness allows that to happen.
Totally.
And that's ultimately what I think he's saying. And so what I think we're talking about today, the title of this is Making Each Moment Count. We're talking about becoming aware, first of all, of what is right now, and then having a moment of simple acceptance and saying, okay, this is what it is. This is what it is. And rather than trying to fight it or reject it or push it away or anything, say, oh, this is how it is right now. Now I can come to a place of response rather than reaction. And I think that's really, really important. I can decide if I want to do anything, and then if I do want to do something about it, how I want to respond to that. And I think that's kind of what we're getting to here.
No, it's very true. It is. When you are in the present moment, okay, let's talk about that, because a lot of times people have a challenge with that. They're always in their head thinking about yesterday, contemplating tomorrow, worrying, blah, 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 blah. It's like you're in your head. If I was to look at you energetically, I see this big energetic field around your head, and there's nothing in your physical body. It's like your aura is like really close to your body because you're not connected. So what happens is that when you're in your head, you're in like do state, and you're trying to make something happen, trying to figure it out. When you're in B state, it's like you have moved from this part of your body to like your chest and your heart area, and you are in your physical body. When you're in the B state, it's like being relaxed in the flow, allowance, being receptive. And just for a lot of people, that's difficult because they think they always have to be in motion.
Right. And just to be clear, what you're talking about the B state, the BE, as opposed to the letter B. Yeah.
Like BEING, being.
Right, the being state, right.
So what happens when you're in the, and you're more of a being mode, it's like, this is where you are able to connect with your higher self. This is where you experience your emotions. And, we've been told that emotions are bad, like I said earlier. So a lot of us were told not to feel. And you tell that to an empath, intuitive, and highly sensitive person as a child and say, ignore it. For me, it kept getting bigger when I ignored it. I said, Mom, it's not going away.
Right. Well, and some parents, in their desire to have you be more well-behaved, actually prohibit not only the bad emotions, but also the good ones.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I had that for myself. I remember I was a pretty rambunctious, high energy guy. Well, I guess I still am, but I was very much like that as a kid. And my mom, she couldn't tolerate it. She did not like it. Go outside, go play out, get away from here. I don't want that. That's kind of how it looked. Yeah. And the way that registered on me was, oh, there's something wrong with me. Mommy doesn't like it when I behave this way. There's something wrong with me. Yeah. And that's where these messages come from. We take these messages on. We almost make a decision unconsciously at a very young age that, oh, I have to behave this way over here in order to make mommy happy.
Well said.
Or whatever.
No, well said, because it's true. And you look at some of our patterning and stuff like that. And and so sometimes when we're, in being, we feel guilty because you should be in motion. You know what I'm saying? It's really a sick job.
Well, and the interesting thing is, what is most people think of meditation as the exact opposite of doing. Oh, you mean I have to stop doing? And that's the way they see meditation. I gotta be still. I gotta be silent. I got to have my hands in my lap. I got to open my palms a certain way. I have to breathe a certain way. I have to have my eyes closed.
That sounds like doing to me, David.
I know, exactly. That's what I was saying. I have to do all these things in order to meditate and not do something else.
Well, I'm going to just touch on that because, yes, when people think about being, they think of meditation. No, being is sitting in nature, sitting on a park bench, watching nature go by, watching humanity go by, playing with your pet. Whatever being is whatever's going to bring you into the present moment where you really don't care what the heck is going on.
Right.
Okay. So it's called mindful activity. When we look back generational to like our grandparents and our great grandparents, the women had it together, really. Their mindful activity was sewing, crocheting, knitting. They were able to be in the presence of that and, whatever their hands were doing, whatever that mindful activity. For some people, it's writing and journaling. For some people, it's taking a walk. Some people, yes, it's maybe formal meditation. What I invite people to do is find out what you like to do and do it. If it means going out and walking your dog every day, and that's part of your downtime to connect, that's what it is for you. There's no right or wrong thing. You just have to explore and find out what's going to be the right thing for you.
That's right. And right on. And I agree 100% with everything you said. In fact, that's what I tell people. I said, meditation is nothing more than a process of bringing yourself into the present moment.
Exactly.
How you do that is completely up to you. Now, I know people who like to go, bungee jumping. Well, let me tell you something. While you're falling through the air on that bungee jump, I'll bet you're not thinking about the bill you forgot to pay.
True.
I think, you're thinking only about what's going on in this moment. That's a beautiful example. Now, not everybody wants to go bungee jumping. I can understand that. And not everybody wants to jump out of an airplane. I can understand that. But, you can find the present moment in anything that you're doing. For example, I have been to a number of men's weekends where one of the jobs I had to do, I was a man of service. I had to be in the kitchen, cooking dinner, cleaning dishes, all that stuff. And I found that the most meditative activity around. While I'm busy scrubbing pots, I was noticing the texture of the pot. Wow, look at that. Look how smooth that is now that I've rubbed it. I'm not thinking so much about my life or about all the problems in my life. I'm just right here in the moment.
Right.
So anybody can do that. And that doesn't require it doesn't require any skill at all.
And it doesn't require any money. That's the
exactly.
It's free.
It's free. Present
for you.
And that's why we call it. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's not why we call it presence, but it's free. It is. It's amazing. And so if we can come to that place of just being here now, whatever that looks like for you, it might be meditation. And I do like meditating, by the way. I do like sitting still and just kind of closing my eyes and just maybe noticing my breath or seeing if I can feel my pulse. Have you ever tried that? You're just sitting quietly and seeing if you can feel your pulse, like in your chest. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. And then I try to, instead of just feel the pulse, I try to feel the flow of my blood. That's pretty amazing. You should try that.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, following your breath is relatively easy, but try and follow the flow of your blood. That's pretty cool.
No, it's, it's so important just to trust and just to follow your intuition. I think that once you get to that point and just let your intuition lead your life, it's like you're more in the present moment, but you also, you have a richer life. You also, you don't take life for granted. Okay. Because the thing is that the only moment you really have is the present moment. There's no guarantee you're going to be here even tomorrow or maybe in an hour. Life is so precious. And instead of trying to avoid living life, I just invite people just to embrace life and just make every moment count. And I really feel for people right now who are feeling the need to connect with family members. It's challenging. It really is.
Right.
And the thing is that if you need to talk to them, just pick up the phone if you can. Come on Facebook Live or anything like that. It's still not, physically touching, but it's still a connection.
Right. And remember that energy does travel across time and space. So,
absolutely.
And that's a beautiful statement. Thank you for making that. The idea of making each moment count, it doesn't mean that it's going to be necessarily always joyful. It's not always going to be angry. It's not always going to be sad. It's not always going to be grief-stricken. But whatever it is, embrace it. Embrace what is there in the moment. Embrace it with full presence. Say, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling like absolute dog shit, pardon my language. And this is what my body wants to feel. So allow your body to feel that. And if it means crying, let those tears out. If it means throwing up, let that happen too. It's all part of the process. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to look forward to something like that happening. But when it happens, say, wow, I'm glad that experience happened because it taught me this lesson. I can see this gift. That's really what the beauty of it is. If you can look at each moment and see it as the gift that it really is, then you will begin to see why we call it presence.
And this just kind of came to mind too. When we look at our four-leggeds and our wingeds, our pets, they are the ultimate of living in the moment.
Exactly.
They don't worry about tomorrow at all. I mean, they're so present right here, right now. I've learned more from my pets over the decades than I've had from any other human beings, even in regards to relationships, because I always had two cats, a male and female, so I got to see the dynamics all the time. But it's very interesting because they don't take anything for granted. They're in the moment. And they are in the flow of nature. And people say, we're the more evolved species. Well, I think the secret is they are. They get it.
Yeah, well, you can find a measuring device that could make anything superior to anything else. I'm sure that's the case. The fact of the matter is, this is my true belief that there is no one life form or energy form that is better or worse than any other.
True.
No, they all have a purpose. They're all here to experience some aspect of overall consciousness, and thereby contribute to the grand understanding of all consciousness. That's how I see it. So, I didn't always see it that way. I used to think that humans were better than animals, but I have changed my view on that. And I don't think animals are better than humans, but I don't think humans are better than animals. I don't believe in
I agree.
So, and so the same holds true between any two human beings. No one human being is better than another. I may be able to, I may have skills that you don't have, but that means only one thing. I have this skill that you don't have, period. That's all it means. It means nothing else. And so it's important for us, I think, to stay connected to the truth of who we are as divine, magnificent, spiritual beings of light and love, and allow ourselves to embrace that essence and start showing up that way instead of showing up as the petty, ego-minded beings that we sometimes like to show up as.
Well said. Once again, well said. I agree. And, we've been witness to so much this last year, not just with our pandemic, but just politically here in the United States and it's been an interesting time for me, it was more of an observation versus reactive. But it told me volumes about what's kind of happening in collective consciousness. So just remember that each one of us can make a difference, and it all starts with us first.
Yeah, each one of us. Sarah says we have to learn to let go of worry, and I totally agree with that. In fact, I'm going to be doing a separate podcast about that very topic that's going to be coming out on Monday. And Donna says, thank you very much. She needs to leave. Well, thank you for coming,
Thanks,
Donna. Appreciate having you here. Appreciate your sharing what's going on, and I wish you all the best with your father. So Dolores, we've had a pretty amazing conversation for the last hour. I don't want to just cut you off. Is there something deep and profound and magnificent that you would like to share? And the answer, of course, is yes.
Well, yes, David, of course. No, we are going to get through what we're going through right now. Just know that and know and trust that. It's, we have to remember things will never go back to the way they were. That's impossible just by the way life is, because we're constantly moving and evolving in a different direction. And just know and trust the process. And I think the most important thing is just love yourself unconditionally, because right now it's about having a lot of unconditional love for ourselves. We're going through major changes, challenging times, and sometimes just loving ourselves unconditionally is the answer.
That's right. Yeah, self-love is, I think, probably one of the most important things that exists. If we can learn to love ourselves, then loving everybody else and loving everything else becomes so much easier.
Yeah. It all starts with us first.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dolores, again, it's just been absolutely fabulous. I always enjoy talking with you. I find we have a lot of humor, which is very, very important. And there's a lot of laughter here, and that's important to me too. Yes. So thank you for being here.
You're so welcome, David. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you all for watching today's program. Those of you who were here live, I thank you for that. Those who are watching the recording, I thank you for that. And just as a reminder, you can watch recordings of this and every other show I do on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. I hope you truly enjoyed this presentation, and I'd just like to let you know that you're going to receive an email over the next few hours, inviting you to provide some feedback. I request that you do that. Feedback helps us to improve the show. And of course, if we can get 4 or 5-star reviews, that helps to, get other people interested as well. So if you can do that, that'd be great. And finally, I'd like to remind you to practice the Life Mastery mantra every day. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod. I'm your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. Bye-bye for now. We'll see you next time.